breaking down all the steps for English paper piecing for you guys so you don't get too overwhelmed all in one video, and you can just kind of get snippets of what might be more important to you, and then you're not listening to me go on and on about the entire process of English paper piecing, because there's quite a few steps in preparation, just like any quilt project. It's just a little different, and once you get through all your steps, get some practice in it, it's super easy. I do love English paper piecing, especially like when I travel and those kinds of things, because I can just sit and sew. I don't have to worry about packing a machine and all that. It's nice and portable to take anywhere. So today we're going to focus on basting. So for me, there's two different methods. I guess technically there's three. You could use your sewing machine to baste. I've done that. But really the two most common is either glue basting or basting just with thread. So I'll show you both. I'm going to move the camera down and show you what's going on, because this is what's more important, is how to work with pieces. So I've just got basic hexes that I'm going to demonstrate. And I do have, so this is a seam roller, and we sell these in the store. Love this guy. Okay. So the first method I'll show you is just glue basting, because it's super easy peasy. What's nice is I can set my paper in the middle. Notice I have a seam allowance. Now these are pre-cut hexes, so they're not as wide. And so you can use the seam roller if you want to give it a little crease ahead of time. You can do that, which is kind of nice. Sometimes I'll do it at least on the sides so that when I go to glue, it may not shift as much. All right. But it's just a good way to kind of give it a nice good press. It's also helpful once you start gluing. You can tell my glue pen is just well loved. These are Soline. What I like about these is they are refillable. So you go through a lot of glue if you do glue basting, and it's nice to be able to actually refill it versus continuing to throw out the container and have to buy new. You just get new little glue inserts. So glue basting, you're just going to run a line of glue. Make sure it's acid free, and then I just will run my fingers, or I'll run the little roller. Okay, and I just keep going. So for me, I just turn, glue, press my finger. We're just going to keep going. And so you always want to just kind of go around in a circle, and you just press these corners in, and you just run your glue, and you just keep going. See, this is nice, super quick, easy. And then when I'm done, once I sew all my pieces together, I use a stiletto to run along the seams. So I'll show you what that looks like. So once you just have other hexes sewn all the way around, I take something like this guy, so just a nice little stiletto, or a tailor's awl, and I'll then go back, run it along this seam to pop the glue away from the fabric and the paper, and then this paper will pop out. A lot of times, especially with hexes, you'll see somebody, I've seen, they put a hole punch in the middle. So they'll put a circle in the middle, that way you can poke your awl or your stiletto into it and pull that paper out once you're done, have it all sewn, and you're ready to take them out. But we'll address some of those steps later on again once everything's sewn. But glue basting otherwise, just always go either counterclockwise or clockwise. Just try to be consistent, because when you start matching things up, especially triangles and those kinds of things, all your little corners will meet up better. And otherwise, that's glue basting. I like it. It's easy to transport with me. And I can, I can sit and do it in front of the TV, or I can do it in the car, all kinds of things. So the other method that is not my favorite is actually using thread. Just basic. Heavier duty is better, just so you can find it and it helps hold it down. I'm just using a 50 weight though, and then I'm doubling it over. Generally you want a brighter color so you can find the thread when you're done. So I grabbed this orange that I've had that I know it's going to take me forever to get through. And so for glue, or for thread basting, generally I'm going to use that seam roller, fold that seam over. Same methods as glue basting. You want to make sure you go just all the way around in one direction or the other. Let's see if I can remember how to do all this, because this is not my preferred method. But all you're doing is wanting to I start at one end and then go to the other. And I do have a big knot in the back, and I don't know if you guys can see that guy, but I leave this nice big knot so I can find it, because you don't want all that in there when you're done. And so I'll go to the other end. If you're using a really long paper, you may want to do multiples. Like I could come in the middle, and it's just like basting anything else, and then come back up. And the stitches don't matter. It doesn't matter how pretty they are, how ugly they are, because it's all being cut out in the end. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus on that guy. So it doesn't matter. But when you get to the corners, what's important with thread basting is that you're going to want to tack it down. So I have folded it. Let's see if you can see how that goes. One over the other. Okay. And I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to go down right into the top of it. Now a lot of times I'll even come back up kind of through it and tack it down again, because you just don't want all of that to shift. So you're just doing these big basting stitches, and you'll get a rhythm down to how big a stitch you want, all those kinds of things. So this is not easy, trying to do it, holding it in the air. Generally, I would have this kind of closer to me. My arms generally are a little more tucked in, and I usually, I'll have a table or whatever, and I can sit and baste. This, I believe, it's an embroidery needle, so it's a thicker needle, which is easier for dealing with trying to pierce through paper. So definitely find one that's a little heavier duty, so you're not bending your needle all the time. That's always helpful. And I'm just going to come back up, and then that way I can go back down in this corner and keep going. And then I'm going to pop back up. I'm just making sure those corners stay nice and flat and go back down. Now, if you have a good, really strong needle, you could potentially do, as they call, rocking the needle. So I poke it through the back, and I'm actually going to rock it back up. See if you can see this. The needle is kind of through two sides, and actually pull it through instead of just doing a straight up down. Generally, I would have a thimble on, but it's early. Oh, goodness. This is why I like the roller. It makes nice flatter seams to then do all these corners. So it's misbehaving on me, so we're gonna roll it into behaving. All right, and we just kind of keep going down and back up. When you do this long enough, you're gonna get a good rhythm at it, and it won't seem quite as tedious. Probably be a lot faster than I'm being. This just isn't my normal. Like I said, it's been a long time since I basted, and you just keep going around. And then in the end, you're just going to make a really big knot, because you're just going to cut it out later. All right, so then we're just going to keep folding our corners and keep just basting. There's lots of video tutorials. Oh, and I went around, I didn't come up. See, you know what? I don't care. I'm not undoing it. So just because it came around, don't let that stop you. Just keep going, because really the key is just getting all these pieces to stay down. And so, like I said, it's all coming out in the end. So none of this has to be pretty. And I always tell you guys, I show you how to do it, incorrectly. I'm not perfect by any means. So once again, I'm getting to a corner. I'm just flattening it out because it's being a little fussy this morning. I don't like having this smaller edge of seam allowance, and that is the problem with buying pre-cut, is that they generally only give you a 1/4 inch, where if you're using templates or just your ruler and drawing around and cutting, you can make it as a nice 3/8, and 3/8 just gives you that little bit extra to deal with, especially if your paper shifts and it potentially is more on one side than the other. It gives you just that little bit extra wiggle room. So definitely a little harder when dealing with this, but that's the benefit of just basting, is you just keep tacking it down. And here I'm at my final corner. So I'm going to come up and then try to go just straight back down through that so that this final corner, and I know it's hard to see, comes straight down, and it's going to hold it down. And then I'll just make my knot. Can't quite give myself enough thread. Another thing to keep in mind, if you run out, that's okay. You could put a knot over here because you ran out and just start another piece and keep going. Because really, once again, doesn't matter how it looks, doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't matter how many pieces of thread you do, you're just basting. So let's see if you guys can see this orange. But this is just how it is. So it's not pretty, but the whole point is keeping it down so that when you stitch them together, because what will happen is you'll put them right sides together, and then you'll go and do a whip stitch or a ladder stitch to put these pieces together. And in the end, you want all these papers to come out, right? So we don't care which way it really looks, whether it's glue basted or thread basted. The idea is all the same. You're just keeping your corners down, keeping your seam allowance down so that you can go and then hand stitch. Okay, so try them both, pick your battles, whatever you think. Like I said, you could do it on a machine. Actually, I guess I could try to, we'll wing it. We can demo something maybe. And do that. So the idea, it's mayhem, right? So the only difference with basting on your machine, really, the corners would be a little more difficult to do. You have to stop and you have to think and those kinds of things. And it's setting your basting stitch. So on your machine, just make sure, swing you around here, the benefit of this one, maybe, will bring you with me, is that you're going to increase your stitch length, like big tons. All the way, I'd say almost to the top, but this isn't a huge piece, so you want to make sure you get a couple stitches in. And then, same idea, I would use the seam roller and kind of press those seams around, or fold over your 1/4 inch, so that as you go to thread baste, yeah, and you need a stiletto. This is why I don't recommend this method. I've done it, but it's not always easy. So, stiletto is definitely key when you're working in these small seam allowances and things. But you can just, yeah, like I don't think that's long enough. I'm going to go all the way. So we're going to go to 6. And I would potentially change my foot on this. And it really doesn't matter. As long as your baste is in the fabric somewhere, doesn't matter, you know, we're not talking 1/4 inch seam allowances, right? So we're going to come to the end. What's nice is I can back up and then flip it over if I go too far. So I use that stiletto, flip the corner, and get you down. And I don't think you can really see it, but same idea. You're just going to flip that corner, use your stiletto, hold the fabric down, and then keep basting. Just keep in mind, you got to keep going around and around, and then you got to pull all these threads back out. So, and this definitely, and we'll see if we can, you know, a lot more stitches in there. So that's all the thread you'd have to pull out. Granted, just like pulling basting stitches out of anything else, because they're bigger stitches, they shouldn't be too difficult. But I'd only try a couple if you're going to do this route. Hand sew them, play with it, because you may decide in the end pulling all the thread out is not worth the potential speed of doing it on a machine. And if you saw, for me it was more awkward. I can do glue basting way faster and not have to be at my machine than machine-wise. So that's why I did it very short-lived, and then said, nah, that was just too time-consuming. So you can do it. I just try it. I wouldn't go and try to do all of them because it may drive you nuts and then take all that thread out and or hand basting. I mean, I know a lot of people that love hand basting. So Same thing, do it in front of the TV, all that kind of stuff. And then there's not the glue to deal with in the end, which generally isn't a big issue, but it's still, you still have to kind of pop those, the seal of the glue around on the paper and all those kinds of things. So everybody has their favorite method. That is the thing with English paper piecing is nobody, I think, does it the same way. You can have a whole room full of people doing paper piecing. Everybody does something different. They do their, whip stitch different, their ladder stitch different, their basting different, all those kinds of things. So, which I kind of like. I like that everybody can develop their own technique, kind of still be their own individual, but enjoy the whole process itself. So hopefully that helped you guys that are new. Or maybe if you've been doing it and you went, oh, I didn't know that. So hopefully I gave you some little nugget today. Otherwise, have a lovely Friday and keep on stitching.